Welcome to Ztechfit. If this is your first time here, please like, subscribe, and share us out. Today, what we're going to be doing, you know the tech part of the name, Ztechfit. We work with computers. In this video, we're going to go through the process of disassembling a CPU.
Before I open it up, you have to put the anti-static strap on so that it discharges any static electricity that you might have on your person, because static electricity is very dangerous for the components in the PC. The static can destroy chips, so we have to make sure we wear the wristband. And the other end of it needs to be connected to something that goes to earth, so a pipe like a radiator or a water pipe. Some of the straps come with a plug that's only connected to the earth. You plug that in and then that will remove the components. To keep them safe, we should keep them in one of these static shielding bags. These are they are static proof, so they should protect the delicate components that are placed inside. These Dell computers are designed so that you don't really need tools to remove the major parts of the computer. Even to take the case off is a switch here. You pull it back, you see the lid flips up, and then it's just a matter of taking the lid off. So now we're looking at the inside of the computer. Here we have the hard drive. In fact, I'll just go ahead and remove that. So with this, we just pull in the two clips here, and then you can lift the hard drive out. In the top or in the side of the hard drive, you have two sets of cables. These ones with the coloured cables on are the power cables. So we can remove that if we just unclip with clumsy fingers to remove it from where it's holding there, and then we can pull out the power. You can see it's the power because it's going directly to the power supply on this side. This is what we call the SATA cable, so that's where the actual data travels back to the motherboard. So we can remove that. Unclip from here. And the final cable is this one on the bottom, which is a power cable for the fan. So we can unplug that from here. Somehow. So if we unplug the power cable that's going to the fan on the hard drive, you may not be able to see it, but there's a tiny little clip here that you need to push. And once that's pushed in, that cable comes out. The hard drive doesn't really contain any chips as such, so it's not really affected by static electricity, so we don't need to put that in the bag necessarily. So we'll just leave that there. Okay, so next I'm going to remove the RAM. On this particular computer, we have a DVD drive. Now I know lots of computers nowadays don't come with DVD drives, as they're fairly old technology, but for this demonstration, I'm going to remove the DVD by lifting up this clip here and then sliding the DVD drive out. Like the hard drive, you've got two sets of cables, one for power, which is this one, which we'll remove now, and this one, which is the data cable, which I will also remove. And that's the DVD. So again, the DVD drive doesn't really contain any chips that are going to be affected by static, so we don't need to put those in the bag either. Right, so now we've removed the DVD drive, we have a clearer visual of the RAM slots. Now, if you noticed, they are black and white clips on them. So when you put RAM in a computer, you have to put them in matched pairs. So ideally, they need to be the same size, as in RAM size, and also need to be in the same slot. So if you've got two sets of RAM in there, they both need to be in the white ones or the black ones, not one black, one white. The computer won't see them both otherwise. The RAM needs to be compatible with the motherboard that you're placing the RAM into. So either look it up on the spec when you're looking up what type of RAM you need. So for the RAM, if I remove one stick here, if you just pull this clip down here, you see it pops up. And do the same on the other side, and then you can remove the RAM. Now, two things to note is the slot in between where the pins are means that the RAM will only go in one way. If you try and put it in that way, it physically won't go in. So don't force it, that you'll end up damaging it. The second thing to note is do not touch the pins. If there is any static on you, even though you're wearing the wristband, you could damage these chips here. So it's important not to touch the pins along the edge of the RAM. So this one we will actually put in the bag because these ones are sensitive to static. And we'll just do the same with the other one. So to recap, coming from the power supply, we have the power cable for the hard drive, and we have the power cable for the DVD drive. And coming from the motherboard itself, we have the SATA cable, the SATA cable for the hard drive, and also the SATA cable for the DVD drive. So from the power supply, as I explained, we have the power cable for the hard drive. We have the power cable for the DVD drive, and then we also have a whole bunch of cables here, as you can see, going directly from the power supply to the motherboard to power the various chips and bits and pieces that are actually connected to the motherboard. You might also notice that there is a battery on the motherboard. This battery is so that the clock keeps running in the background even when the computer's switched off and disconnected from the mains, so that when you plug it back in, the time's correct again, because the watch battery powers the clock. So here, this great big piece of plastic here is actually a heat sink. You can just about see some fans here. Now these distribute the heat coming off the processor, which is directly underneath here, and there's also a fan. Now because the processor does a lot of hard work once the computer's running, it needs a lot of cooling so that it doesn't overheat. This needs to be removed with a screwdriver though. This isn't a component that just unclips. Once you've taken this off, there are two clips that you can just lift up and remove the processor. Now the processor is extremely delicate, so you have to be very, very, very careful with that one. Once you remove that, you can obviously stick that in the anti-static bag. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, underneath here is the processor. This bit here is where the fan is. This bit here is the heatsink. So I'm just going to unscrew that side and this side. If you can see what that screw is.
I can't see. Yeah, go now. Yeah, let's screw it. Cool.
Okay. Right. I don't think these screws come out fully, but once we've done that, this just flips up.
Cool.
And you can properly see the heatsink now. And under here, this bad boy here is the processor.
Sweet.
You can see that it's got this grey stuff. This stuff is the thermal paste, and that just maintains a good contact between the processor itself and the heatsink. And it's normally made of silicon, some are made of silver bits. So it conducts heat but not necessarily electricity, because you don't really want electricity to pass between the two bits. So to remove the processor, we push this clip down, slide it out, and that will slip that up, which will enable you to lift up that, and there underneath is our processor.
Woo!
So what I'll actually do is remove the processor, and now you can see there are hundreds and hundreds of pins in the bottom of this processor and in where the processor sits. Now again, the processor has slots just to make sure that it goes in the right way. So the two slots either side will line up with the two lugs, if you like, where the processor sits. Again, it's really important to not touch the pins, especially on one of these, because there are lots and lots of delicate components underneath it in one of these anti-static belts.
Cool.
There we go.
Awesome.
So now that we've unscrewed the heatsink, we can literally remove that from where the motherboard is. I'm going to put it this way around so that we don't put the paste on the table. Right, so now we're going to remove the power supply. At this point, the power supply is still connected to the motherboard. So we will disconnect this big block of cables here by pushing in this clip. If you can see, there's a clip here.
Yeah.
If you push that in with your thumb,
Yeah.
and then this should just slide out.
Sweet.
So now the power supply, not quite free of all the cables, because there is another power cable here. So same thing again, you just push in the clip and lift it up gently. So now the power supply should not be connected to anything at all. So we had two sets of power cables going to the motherboard. We had this one on this big block here, and then we also had these ones here, which we've also had to disconnect. So to remove the power supply, we have 1, 2, 3 black screws here. These screws are actually holding the internal components of the motherboard in, so we don't want to remove those. Also on a power supply, just as a note, sometimes you might see a switch. Some power supplies automatically detect whether you're using UK power, which is 250 volts, or you're using American or Caribbean power, which is 110 volts. In which case you would change the switch depending on what your power source is. Now the thing is, do not switch this to 110 if you are using 250 volts, because you're obviously sending 250 volts into this and it will blow up. You do not want that. So if I unscrew one, two, three. In fact, you see this power supply is actually moving when I'm doing this last one.
Cool.
Whoop. Try not to lose those. And there is our free power supply.
Sweet. Yes. So that's our power supply, guys. I am living for this. I hope you're learning something from it. Awesome.
Okay, so our motherboard is still not completely free. There's still a few cables. We have this one here, which is actually the power cable to the fan that cools the processor. So we need to remove that cable there. There is also a cutout switch here, so that if you open the lid while the computer is on, it will cut out. So we need to remove that cutout cable here. And finally is this cable here, which is sending the data to the USB sockets and the headphone socket and the microphone. So that cable there, it's got a handy little loop here that you can just pull and remove that ribbon cable. And there we have it. The final thing would be to just unscrew the motherboard, but I think we're going to stop there.
Guys, you can now see the motherboard is all free of all the internal components and all the cables that were attached to it. We would need to, if you are carrying on the process of deassembling, to uninstall the motherboard by just unscrewing it from the casing, and that will be the final section. So all those screws that I'm showing you, we would need to remove or unscrew in order to get the motherboard out. Peace out.